I'm Kapil Chalil Medathil, and I'm the Tinkin Endowed Assistant Professor of Civil and Industrial Engineering at Clemson University. I'll be moderating this particular session. And today we have, it's my privilege to introduce you to Mr. Kuldeep Kelkar, the Senior Vice President for Services at UserZoom. He is a Clemson Tiger. He graduated from Clemson Industrial Engineering Program in 2000, and he spent more than a decade as the Global Director for UX and Design at PayPal. And right now, he's the Senior Vice President for Services at UserZoom. And UserZoom is basically an all-in-one platform to rapidly test usability and to measure user experience as such. And again, it's an important thing, especially in light of this COVID-19 crisis that we are currently undergoing through. And there are a lot of entities, all the big Fortune 500 companies right now using these kind of platforms, primarily to conduct user research and to conduct usability studies as such. And thank you very much, Kuldeep, for taking the time to talk to us. Now, we are really interested to learning more about this particular process from you. And again, we are going to video record this particular presentation, and we will make it available for the rest of the Clemson faculty and students. And the participants will be muted during this presentation, but feel free to send questions via chat, and I'll be more than happy to moderate it. And Selena, thank you very much for taking the time to maybe organize this particular event. Thank you very much. Kuldeep, we are ready whenever you are.
Thank you, Kapil. Thank you, Selena. And hello to everyone. Still miss Clemson, as I was saying. It's been 22 years, and I still am a Clemson Tiger. Still follow football. This weekend, the last two Clemson games were just, it was a little bit boring. We're winning in such a crazy way that I'm still a big Clemson Tigers fan. I have a ton of hoodies. Is a little bit warm out here in California, so otherwise you would see me wearing a Clemson hoodie all the time. Amal, who works with UserZoom at UserZoom, might have seen me in a Clemson hoodie from time to time. So great, thank you, Kapil, for that introduction. I do have a deck that I would share, and we can talk through. The title of the track is Actionable Insights for Better User Experiences. So I'll try to narrate what I mean by that, the history of user experience, the term usability, what's happening in the industry these days, what the opportunity looks like. And towards the end, I would definitely want to keep some time for Q&A. So as questions come up, please start typing them in the chat room. While presenting, I might not be able to get to those questions, but we'll definitely try to get to those questions towards the end. Yeah. To me, this is more of a conversation than just a presentation. And to everyone that's listening in, primarily students, I would strongly encourage you to take notes. There might be a quiz at the end, or might not be, so we'll keep you guessing. And so do pay attention, because there is going to be some follow-up and action item towards the end. So I'll share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can, Kuldeep.
Okay, perfect. So went to Clemson, moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, late 90s during the dot-com boom, early 2000. Primarily the reason to move to the San Francisco Bay Area was pretty much all the jobs in the dot-com era were here, which brought me to the Bay Area, and never looked back for the last 20 years. Right? And the dot-com boom busted, but that didn't matter. There was still a lot of software to be built and a lot of companies that continued to hire, and my 20-year journey that started from Clemson moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. But in my hearts of hearts, I'm still a Clemson fan. Now in this COVID climate, the last two games that I watched, they were at, I guess, a couple of people 10 feet apart. So this clearly is a photograph from a year ago or 2 years ago, just something that I Google searched. But but still a Death Valley fan, and worked as a student police. So I have vivid memories of going to these games and standing outside in screeching heat. And one day I'm going to come back and watch the game inside the Death Valley. I'm just waiting for it. Cool. So as I said, uh, uh, in the summer of 98, moved from India to Clemson for my master's in industrial engineering. Took all the courses. I mean, I know some of you are from industrial engineering department, some of you are from different departments, largely engineering focused. So I'll keep this talk a little bit generic, but somewhat focused on the topic that I'm very familiar with, which is user experience, digital experiences, design. So my undergrad was industrial engineering. My master's was from industrial engineering. As I said, I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. Different jobs, small companies, large companies, spent a decade at PayPal. Sure, all of you or many of you are familiar with eBay, PayPal, and generally the marketplaces and PayPal as the payments provider. Back in 2004, PayPal was relatively small. eBay had just acquired it. The journey that I experienced at PayPal over the 10 years was quite a learning experience for me personally, and definitely for the company as the company dramatically grew. In 2014, after 10 years, left PayPal, joined Tata Consultancy. Some of you are probably familiar, 500,000 employees, 21 billion in revenue, this massive conglomerate that is Tata, and spent a year and a half, lot of consulting, lot of exposure to lots of the big brands, and then joined UserZoom. Now, my journey to UserZoom was pretty interesting because UserZoom is a tool. It's a tool. I'll talk a little bit about UserZoom. It helps customers collect those insights and distribute those insights. And at PayPal, we were using UserZoom since 2008, 2009. And so it was an interesting journey for me to join UserZoom from PayPal. So that's my personal story. But today I'm here to talk about digital experiences and user experience in specific and user research methods to get to the crux of it, the methods, the tools, and I'll definitely want to end with some key thoughts. But user experience as a term might be only 20, 30-year old, but the concept is not old, or the concept has a lot of root in the history. And this is an interesting screenshot. The farthest I could find, the term usability as a sales pitch goes back all the way to 1936. This was before World War II. So for those that are thinking, hey, usability is new, not really. The concept of easy to use has probably existed with mankind since the beginning, but the term really is less than 100 years old. I come from human factors. Many of you probably call yourselves human factors engineers. And World War II really expedited the entire discipline of human factors and designing things to retrofit the limitations of humans' hands and feet and heights and widths and eyesights and the abilities is what really pioneered from the human factors discipline, which eventually became usability or user experience in the software world. I primarily live in the software world, but my roots are in industrial engineering and industrial design. And so that's where my philosophy around human factors really started. So the advantage for all of you that are at least in the industrial engineering department, don't think of this just as hardware design. The principles are still the same, even if you end up in the software world. My life changed when I was at Clemson University, and a big part of that were courses like 801, 802, 811. If I remember these numbers correctly 20 years later, most likely they are the right numbers. But one of those courses that either Dr. Greenstein or Dr. G taught used this book. Yeah? And for those on this call that have seen this book, please open it again and reread it, because 20 years later, I still do that. It is a classic. It changed the paradigm of hardware design, software design, the notion of affordances, the notion of, hey, you need to design the door example, which I still give, the affordance of a door where you can open it or close it. I still use it in my consulting life 20 years later. So if you have this book, please open it and read it from time to time, because this is gold. This is still very valid even 30 years later. Yeah? And hats off to people like Don Norman and Jacob Nielsen. So that's my point of view towards the history. But let's look at the opportunity. Right? We are in 2020, COVID or not, crazy year, but leave that on the side. The massive development that has happened in the last 20 years in the software world has really led to explosive growth in the jobs and the skill sets that are needed to deliver great user experiences. And so if you're not familiar with Nielsen Norman Group, go check out nngroup.com. It's the Nielsen Norman Group. Jacob Nielsen published this article a while ago. And please note the y-axis is a logarithmic scale. It's not a linear scale. And it's truly an explosive growth in the UX field. Every company that I know is hiring either designers or researchers. Every company that I know of is struggling with delivering great user experiences. And there is still massive opportunity both in the consumer products as well as B2B products. And so for this generation, looking forward to all the great experiences that you guys will deliver over the next 20, 30, 40 years, because there's still going to be a ton of need in coming years. But then there are some key markers. So in year 2000, which is where I moved to the Silicon Valley, that was the .com era. Websites were growing left and right in the late 90s. And then in 2007, this happened. And that fundamentally changed the industry, the software. I mean, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but touch screens and glass interfaces have substantially changed how software gets developed, what people focus on, what business-oriented people started shifting their mindset to thinking about design, because suddenly Steve Jobs comes out of with this phone that everyone gets oohs and wows, and it's all design focused and he's all experience focused, right? And prior to this, user experience was one of the function, but it wasn't the leading function that drove market capital value for a company. And this got all other CEOs of all other companies thinking about, gee, what is this design thing? And I want that. Yeah. Because of the market performance. And then suddenly you start looking at benchmarks or business focused companies, right? And so I'll just go McKinsey and Company, which caters to CEOs and executives, and start talking about building a design culture and start talking about user experience. And I can attest to through personal experiences as well as through just looking at the industry, that user experience used to be this function that was in the corner. It still is at many companies, but in general, it used to be this function that was in the corner. And it suddenly started becoming the core asset and the competitive advantage that many of these digital companies had. And suddenly now the executive team is paying attention to this thing called experience, which then again booms the overall addressable market. So I've worked in product companies, I've worked in consulting companies. I right now run the services organization for UserZone. We do look at what we call the addressable market. Hey, how big is this UX market going to be? Because our future growth depends on how big the addressable market is. And I have no doubt, we have done a lot of market research out there. where the total addressable market for this thing called user experience, and I'm being vague about it, and I'll get to exactly what I mean by user experience. I'll get to what I mean by user research, the methods and the tools. But in general, user experience continues to be a booming industry, which is on a trajectory which will potentially get to several billion, unexplored market that exists still out there. And the reason for that is, and in your courses and in general software development, for those that are familiar with software development, and there's waterfall and there is agile development. I'm not going to get into the details of software development or product development lifecycle, but generically speaking, any product, any software, any specific thing that you are creating, that you're developing, goes through some sort of a development life cycle. Right? So at first you want to understand what the problem is, who does this problem address to, how big is this problem, fall in love with the problem statement, but then plan as to how you are going to solve it, design some solution, get some feedback on that solution, iterate on that solution and those designs. You then get into developing that solution, you test that solution, you launch it into the market. Right? And there's no rocket science here, right? You start with some sort of a problem, you come up with some solution, you test that solution, you launch it into market, you keep testing that solution and continue to get feedback. And there is always a 2.0 and a 3.0 and a 14.0 if you're iOS, and on, right? So there's endless development to the dot releases for every single software, be it SaaS, be it phone software, be it app, it doesn't matter. It all goes through some sort of a development life cycle. What has changed though in the last 20 years is there's a lot of tools and techniques, and those have evolved. Collaboration tools. Back in the day, it used to be only emails, right? And now it's emails and Slacks and text messages and WhatsApp and you name it, right? Explosive growth in the communication platforms out there. Explosive design tools, which is where, so back in the day, if you wanted to do design, you probably only had Adobe Photoshop or maybe an Adobe Illustrator. Over the last 20 years, tons and tons of tools have come up into the market, be it project management tools, be it research tools, right? Be it communication tools, be it software development tools, be it Asana, right? I mean, QA tools. So there's, for a company like UserZoom that has 250 employees, privately held, we easily use 50 SaaS applications, software as a service application, as a company of our size. So imagine companies that have 10,000 employees or 50,000 employees. How much software must they be consuming? Quite a lot. And this is a constantly evolving field. Of course, this slide comes from UserZoom. So you see UserZoom in 4 places. We like to market our own tool a lot more. But the point is that there is explosive growth in the overall software market. And that has changed in the last 20 years. And I predict many more tools will come into the market because everyone is trying to figure out what pain exists in that software development lifecycle, or what pain exists in a consumer's life, or what pain exists in the B2B world. And there is a software that can try to solve that solution. And so, okay, hopefully I made that point. But as I said, that has led to a lot of growth in the need for the skill sets. I literally went on LinkedIn Sunday, I believe, and did a search on these terms, just search user experience. I don't mean to say there are 91,000 jobs that are exactly as user experience designers, but that skill set, that term, at least 91,000 open jobs are right now have the term user experience in their job description somewhere, or UX or designer, and the numbers are in there. And of course, this changes day to day. And so if you're doing a search right now, the numbers might be different. I know LinkedIn shows different things for different people. The point is, there have been a lot of jobs and a need out into the market for this skill set for a long time. and I expect that to be the same in future as well. So that's great. So there is demand. Now the question is there supply? Do we have the skill sets? Do we have people? I talk to a lot of hiring managers and they will commonly complain, hey, we don't have enough talent. Yeah. And here we are, just I'm sure many of you on this call will be like, Kuldeep, what are you talking about? Each one of us is looking for a job. And what are you talking about that there isn't enough talent out into the market? The reason is that user to deliver an awesome user experience, you need a lot of skill sets. You need product developers, you need good software engineers. But when it comes to user experience and design, you need interaction designers, you need people with the arts background with visual design, you need copy and editing and people from psychology background. And of course, my bread and butter, which is user research. You need people who understand how humans behave, who have a deep understanding or educational background in either human factors or psychology or industrial design, or understand the crux that, hey, a person has to use this at the end, and humans haven't evolved that fast. We don't just start to evolve generation to generation. Our brains still evolve at the rate at which evolution allows brains to be evolved, and so there are human is the limiting factor at this point in time from a technology standpoint. But that's not it, and I have no intention of going through every one of this skill set. My only point is that to deliver a great user experience, at least in the software world or in the digital world, and I would argue every company is a digital company going forward, there's lots of skill sets that are needed. So just eyeball the skill sets that are on this slide and make a note for yourself as to how good you are in all of these. I have, in my 20 years, not found a single person who is great at each one of these skill sets. I would contemplate that none of you is going to be awesome at each one of this. But I would still want all of you to know enough about what these skill sets are and know at least a little bit about what those skill sets are. And then pick whichever skill set you are really going to hone on and go deep into it and try to get to know everything that you can about that particular skill set. So let's zoom into user research, which is what I have spent a good part of 2 decades trying to focus on. Right? I guess this by itself is a 1-hour conversation to be had. I'll just keep it brief and at a very high level when it comes to user research. I don't know the current coursework and Kapil, what you or other professors cover, but Christian Rohr, and his photo is up here. He published this article with, and again, it's Norman website, but Christian is someone that I know because when I used to run the global research organization at PayPal, Christian had just moved from Yahoo to eBay, and both eBay and PayPal were together. And at this point in time, Christian is on the UserZoom advisory board as well. And he just did a webinar for us, and so someone that I highly respect. And this article gets referenced a lot in the UX community. So for all of you, if you're not familiar with this, just go to Google, do a quick search of what method to use when, Nielsen Norman, and you'll find this. And what it says is that there are lots of different research methods. There are different methods that answer different types of questions that have different confidence intervals and confidence levels and margin of error and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, it can be plotted in this 2x2. Research methods are either qualitative or quantitative. Either they are attitudinal or behavioral. Let me see if I can use some example. Attitudinal is, I use this example in my consultancy, I'll use this here as well. So if your business question is, and if let's say you're working for a company that is building a coffee machine, Yeah, and it might be a small consumer-oriented coffee machine. And if the business question is, hey, can people that buy this unbox it and use it for the first time? And if that's the business question, then what you really need to do is understand the behavioral attributes in a qualitative manner. Because if 5 out of 5 people can open the box and plug it in and use it, there's decent chance that many more people can do that. Because again, as long as humans have 2 hands and 2 eyes and can generally read English and follow instructions and have general tech savviness that's representative of a consumer market, that might be good enough. But then if you want to sell different coffee brands or different coffee flavors, you want to know what the preference of individuals is, I would bet that if you test with people in Seattle versus Atlanta, depending on the region, depending on the brand affinity, depending on the taste preferences, depending on the geography and climate, preferences might change. So preference testing in general tends to be more attitudes. Hey, what do you like or dislike? And it needs to be a little bit more on the quantitative side because it's going to change from region to region because you want to figure out how many and how much, what is the impact of that of the but then the why and how to fix it or can they use it, those tend to be more qualitative. And what people do, the direct observations is what the behavior is, and what people say, what their attitudes are, is on the attitude side. Yeah. If there are questions, please type those questions out and we'll certainly try to answer them. I'll certainly try to answer them as we go along. I don't intend to go through all these methods. There's lots and lots of methods. He has this list of methods up here. At UserZoom, we have a list of methods. Um, at one point, I had seen a bulleted list of over 100 methods from either Human Factors International or what is now UXPA, User Experience Professional Association. The gist isn't every method is going to have its pros and cons, but they can all be plotted towards, are we trying to understand the behavior or the attitude? It can be, and hey, I'm trying to understand the behavior as well as attitude. And do I want direct observations so that it makes an impact on my brain processing? Or do I want graphs and charts and larger sample sizes because I'm trying to understand the impact and the scale of that impact? Moving from methods into what I'm calling models. So in the business environment, it is never enough to go to a business executive and say, I did research, and here was the sample size, and I used that method. They're not going to care how you got to the answer. First, tell what the answer was. And the analogy that I use is, let's imagine there was a Clemson game, a football game, and there was an opposing team. Someone says, hey, what was the result of that game? The natural reaction is going to be, hey, Clemson versus this other team played and Clemson won. Great, that's the headline. But then if I said, hey, who won? And you started giving me stats. If you started saying, this guy ran that much and that guy had that much scoring potential, I'm like, no. First tell me who won. So that's where models really come into picture. And there's lots of models that are out there. Jacob Nielsen has a model which defines what usability is and how can you define usability, going into everything from ease of use to easy to learn to easy to remember. There are ways to measure this. There are ways to capture this. There's lots of models that are out there. I've listed some of them here. I assume we will make this deck available to all the attendees. I'm happy to share the deck. And so if you are interested, you can certainly try to read it offline. In the last 30, 40 years, system usability scale has been quite useful to the UX community. So if you intend to become a researcher, I would strongly recommend that you understand what that is. Google came out with what is called a HEART framework: happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. Super Q is again a systemized scale and with percentiles, and there's lots of models out there. Forrester has its own model. And if you are interested in understanding these models, if you are interested in understanding key performance indicators, KPIs, I would recommend you do a Google search, selfless self-promotion. Search on Google for UserZoom KPI and my first name, Kuldeep, and you'll find um, several blog articles that I have published. You'll find webinars that I've gone in the past. These are topics that need at least an hour or two of in-depth conversations around what does KPIs mean. KPIs, key performance indicators. So in the business world, you have an inherent desire to measure user experiences. Every executive that I have met has always desired to measure user experience. But the science behind measuring user experience is not fully settled. So different organizations will measure it in different ways. And in this article, we go through and talk about all the KPIs that at least we have seen across the UserZoom customer base that that we clearly observe that people are trying to measure. And then every executive that I have met has always asked, yeah, but that's a lot of KPIs. Just tell me who won and who is the winner. We compared company A versus B versus C versus D, what is called competitive benchmarking. Tell me who won. Don't tell me about all the KPIs and everything, just tell me who won. And so to answer that who won question, we came up with what we call QX score, quality of experience score, which again takes into the behavioral and attitudinal measures of the next slide, which gets into the details of task success, which gets into the details of attitudinal measures, what people say and feel is equally important to what people do. It combines those behavioral and attitudinal metric into a single score, and it helps answer the question of who won. In the UX world, usually that's not enough, because after you tell them who won, the next question that any business executive will have is okay, why? And tell me a little bit more. And so you can then unpack, well, on these tasks, this happened, on those tasks that happened, but then they preferred appearance, but really didn't trust it, whatever the story might be. Right? And so this helps you unpack that story, narrate that story, but it starts with who won. Very quickly, UserZoom. I've worked here 5 years. I've been a customer for 10 years. And so quite familiar with the company, with the brand. For anyone on this call, if you're interested, you can go to userzoom.com. You can take a look at what we offer. It's essentially a software as a service, web-based tool that allows you to build a study. We assume that our researchers and designers are going to have a hypothesis or some sort of an objective. They're going to formulate that research into a research plan. They're then going to build a study. They're going to collect data, either from their own customers or participants that we provide. They're then going to look at the results, watch the videos, look at the graphs and charts, try to either prove or disprove their original hypothesis or just learn something new, and then go back to the business. And the business is going to ask, okay, hey, what do I need to improve? What did people say? What did people prefer? Whatever the original business questions were, they're going to try to answer that using tools like UserZoom. We like to claim that as your product development lifecycle journey begins with the upfront discovery, you can use UserZoom. When you are in the design and iterate and validation phase, you can use lots of different methods and techniques for design validation, concept testing, paper prototypes, web-based prototypes, mobile prototypes, does not matter. And then after you go live, there's a chance that someone will say, okay, how did we do with this project? What are the actual KPIs and measures? And there's lots of tools and techniques around that as well. Since I'm not going to get into the details of UserZoom, I would encourage all of you to go to academy.userzoom.com. These courses are free and available. It's not just for customers, so you don't have to be a customer to log in. You can just create your own account, watch videos, take some lessons, take some exercises, and learn for yourself. Yeah. Kapil, we can chat more offline. I know we didn't get a chance to chat more offline, but there's also UserZoom for universities. It's for free. So if there is interest, we can set you up to do that, or Amal can help you set up that. And if you want to use it for courses, it's free to use.
Absolutely, Kuldeep. I believe we can touch base at a later time to learn more about this particular program. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's free to use because we want to encourage students to experiment, to learn, to try it out and use it for school projects. And I know lots of universities already are using it as part of their either semester. So at any point in time, if we are teaching what usability testing is, and there might be a project related to, hey, go do usability testing with 5 to 10 people, then you can do all of that either on UserZoom or a company that we acquired, which is called Validately. We provide these tools for free. In general, you don't need a tool to run usability testing. I mean, you can just pretty much sit next to anyone else and run a usability test. But tools provide a framework and a structure and a method to the madness. And so I would encourage you to learn the proper tools and techniques and the research plan and doing it the right way, rather than just, hey, I spoke with 5 people and here are my results. That's not always good enough. Sometimes it is, but most often it is not. Okay, so hopefully there are some questions. Keep typing those questions because I do want to get into a little bit tangential and key thoughts. And these are my reflections based on my 2 years experience at Clemson, followed by the dot-com boom and the dot-com bust, and working for a company like PayPal that grew tremendously over the 10 years, and working at smaller companies and larger companies. And user experience, as I said, has been growing. It will continue to grow. It will need a lot of skill sets. Lots of companies want the UX skill set, but cannot find that skill set. So, hey, how do we bridge that gap? What are the skill sets that are truly needed and what's missing? And so I was reflecting, taking note of, hey, how many people, right now at UserZoom, the services organization, which includes support and researchers and consultants and research delivery people and sourcing, participant sourcing, it's 70 people here. But in my 20 years, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of them. I've hired somewhere between 100 to 150 across all the companies that I work for. And if I have to sum it all down, yes, your resume, yes, your LinkedIn profile, yes, your grades, yes, the projects are important. If you have internships, that's great because that's real experience. Not everyone gets to do an internship. I didn't, and I would still say I'm fairly successful in life. But what I'm looking for, generally speaking, is this notion of a maker versus consumer. So if you're a maker, if you're a builder, if you're doing something, if you're building stuff, then there is going to be an output, right? So I keep telling both my daughters, 10 years and 13 years old, don't spend your time endlessly watching YouTube videos. Don't spend your time endlessly watching TikTok, because it's just consumption over consumption over consumption over consumption. I watch a lot of Netflix, but that's fine. That's my downtime. But that's just consumption. Consumption is not enough. Just reading books is not enough. Just attending this webinar is not enough. You have to make something out of it, right? It has to be tangential. It has to be something you can touch, feel, even if it is software. Write a blog, write an article, create a project on the side, sketch some notes. I don't care what it is, make something, don't just consume stuff, because then you'll have something tangible to show as a result of that being a maker person. The second is there's Myers-Briggs, lots of psychological tests and other things, but in general, are you a T-shaped person? If you're not familiar with what T-shaped persons are, the general theory is that, hey, you have broad skill sets that touch several different areas, but then you go deep in one particular skill set, whatever that skill set might be. It is not enough in today's economy that you can only do one thing and one thing really, really well. That's good. We also want a broader understanding of how does business work? What does my CEO know? What does so on and so forth? So keep an eye out on the skill sets that you are trying to attain, but then always be solution oriented. In interviews or in my conversations with employees at UserZoom or even previous companies, people come with, hey, here's my problem. Great. I mean, all of us have problems. I spend 10 hours on Zoom every day listening to problems. I have my own problems. Right? I can listen to people's problem for free. I don't need to pay anyone to hear about the problems. Right? The reason why companies are paying you, employees, is to find what the solution is. So please, please, please be solution oriented. There will always be problems. The day problems disappears, I don't think humanity will ever be in a place where there are no problems, because I don't know what we'll do if there are no problems. There will always be problems, small problems, big problems. You will have problems, I'll have problems. It doesn't matter. Be solution oriented. Position those solutions. Say, here are the 3 solution options that I can contemplate. Which one should we go? Okay, that makes sense. I can make that judgment call saying, I understand the problem. You propose 3 solutions. I can go with solution number 2 because I understand the pros and cons of the solution. That sounds great. It's critical and really important in outside of academia, probably even in academia, it is important to be solution oriented. This is key. So every time I reflect on these topics, it feels like I went through my primary school and my middle school and my high school, and I don't know how many subjects I learned, probably hundreds and hundreds of them. And then 4 years of engineering, which was 36 subjects, and Clemson with masters, which was what, I don't know, 12-ish courses, 36 credits, I don't even remember. 20 years later, what do I use? I use PowerPoint or Google Slides. I use Excel, maybe some data analysis, and I spend 80% of my time talking. I'm not kidding. 90% of my time today goes in just talking to people, convincing them of a great idea or listening to ideas. That communication and that articulation skills, my frustration 20 years after coming out of the education skill is I don't think I went through any structured program which forced me to learn negotiating skills, which forced me to understand the best practices around communication, which rarely do you get opportunities to have unless you are in a debate prep camp or somewhere else, you don't get exposure to that level of communication skills and those negotiation skills and knowing that you're not always right, and even listening skills in that debate. Practice those skills. Even if it is amongst your friends, have that skill to communicate certain idea. It's not about you being right and somebody else being wrong, but it's all about communicating with passion and clarity whatever you're trying to communicate. That doesn't matter. Last but not the least, I've interacted with a lot of designers. I've interacted and hired a lot of researchers and copywriters, and the ones that are successful tend to be good at their craft. Back to the T-shape, right? They're really good. They're a really good researcher or a really good communicator or a really good visual designer or an interaction designer, but they are generally in that T-shape, a business savvy person. And you don't need an MBA. Yeah, I mean, some of you might be MBA students and good for you, I don't believe everyone needs an MBA to understand the basics of how companies make money. Companies exist for the sole reason of making money. Don't want to get political. Not talking about companies exist to make money. If you cannot speak the language of money, then good luck. Go work somewhere else. Have a basic understanding of what revenue means and bookings mean and profit means, and a street side vendor understands this language without going through any education. People understand money. I have $100 in my pocket, and there is money never lies, right? When I watch excessive Shark Tank. So if you are not familiar with Shark Tank, go do a search on Shark Tank. This is where five sharks are essentially investors, and people go out there and pitch their ideas and get funding. Watch some Shark Tank just for the fun of it. Don't just consume it. Keep some in your brain. Start to make some. If you have great ideas, start a small business, and you'll learn really, really fast. I know that sounds a little bit professorial, but take this to heart, because it's a competitive world. It is not enough for you to say, hey, I can run research. Well, so can the other 100 people run research as well. Your skill set alone is not going to be enough. You want tangible experiences of what you have done. What blogs have you written? What projects have you executed? Where is the research report? Where is something tangible to look at? Where are the designs? If you crafted a design, where's your portfolio? Show me something of what you have created. Show me that you're really good in one thing and broad in others, that you're solution oriented, that you have the communication skills, you can speak with passion, you're articulate. Otherwise, none of your skill sets matter if you really cannot communicate those skill sets, those ideas within, and if you're not business savvy at all. Yeah. So here's the quiz part, or the commitment part. I hope you are not just consuming this webinar and you had a piece of paper and a pen next to you, or you are taking notes. If not, make a mental note, pull a piece of paper and a pen, or open a Word document, sticky note. I don't care, write it on a piece of wall. just for your own, what are the 2 or 3 things that you learned based on what I was talking about in the last half hour or so? If you learned anything, or you can say, hey, I didn't learn anything. He was just talking about stuff that I didn't understand. That's okay. Just write something that, hey, what did you learn? And more importantly, what would you want to do? What's the action item? And I spoke a lot about the history. Hey, maybe there's an action item. I'll do some Google search. Spoke about some methods. Maybe you will deep dive into those methods. I spoke about UserZoom. Maybe I'll go to learn.userzoom.com and try to take some videos, watch some videos and try it out. Maybe you'll do a search of the term that I said, Kuldeep UserZoom KPI, and read a little bit more about KPIs. Maybe you'll read the Don Norman book, or maybe you'll read the Jacob Nelson book, right? Whatever is your action. And I don't need to know what your commitment is. That's for you to decide what you are committing to do. And it's for you to decide, are you going to follow through that commitment? Ain't going to matter to me, because I'm sitting here in California, and I might never know nor care if you have done it or not. My question to you is, are you going to do whatever you are writing down on a piece of paper? That's for you to decide.
Great. Thank you, Kuldeep, and thanks a lot for the wonderful presentation that you did. I learned a lot about some of the techniques that you mentioned. Maybe I was not clear about those techniques in the past, but again, thank you so much for taking the time to go through all these slides. Again, thank you very much, for spending time with us, Kuldeep. There are a few other questions. There are a lot of people who thank you on chat, for taking the time, and especially the focus that you had on the T-shaped approach. So there was one participant who said that, I believe, the the concept of being a T-shaped person in the UX research. That made a lot of sense to him. Again, thank you very much for your time, Kuldeep. And I'm sure that the entire student community and the faculty over here are thankful for you taking the time to do this particular talk. And I will ask the students to maybe reach out to you either on LinkedIn, if they have any specific questions. Again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kapil. I'll definitely stay in touch on the academy portion, and we can chat more offline. Thank you, everyone. I'm super excited. Go Clemson, go Clemson Tigers. I'm a big Clemson fan, and keep studying.
Take care, stay safe, and stay healthy. Thank you all. Really appreciate your time.